For more on the war in Ukraine, Pentagon Press Secretary and retired Rear Admiral John Kirby joins us now. John, thanks for being here. Admiral Kirby, we appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
How quickly will these latest approved weapons and assistance get into Ukrainian hands?
This, believe it or not, the very first shipment on just the package the president announced this morning should be able to get into Ukraine within the next 24 to 48 hours. That's how fast we're going to start moving these things.
What's the lag, if any? What are the risks in the transportation process here?
Well, look, I mean, there's always weather to factor in, of course, and, mechanical difficulties. But we have been able to manage 8 to 10 flights per day going into some of these transshipment sites in the region outside Ukraine. And that's just United States. That's not just including other flights from other countries. Then the United States helps coordinate and package up all those shipments and get them by ground into Ukraine. Now, it's driven in by Ukrainian drivers. We're not doing that, of course. But honestly, there hasn't been a single day since the invasion that we haven't been able to get something into Ukraine and into their hands throughout this whole fighting. In fact, Secretary Austin had a chance to talk to his counterpart just the other day in Ukraine, and he assured Secretary Austin that that material is arriving every day and it is getting into the hands of their fighters.
What have you heard about President Putin's response to this latest package? What's the latest assessment of how the Russians will respond?
Well, we haven't seen a overt response by the Russians with respect to this most recent package. They have in the past said that they hold them to be legitimate targets inside Ukraine if they to go after these shipments of these weapons. We have not seen them interdict any of the shipments that are going into Ukraine, but obviously we're mindful of that, and we're also very careful. We don't talk about how things are getting into Ukraine, how often, how fast. We don't really put out a lot of details because we want to preserve the ability to do that for as long as possible.
It seems you want to make sure these weapons get into Ukrainian hands as soon as possible, but at the same time, even if you're not driving them across the border, if the United States isn't doing that, what can you share in any detail about the kind of training the U.S. is providing to Ukrainians at the border before they hand over the weapons?
That's a great question. Most of the systems that we have been giving them over the course of the last several weeks don't require any training at all. They know how to use these things. They know how to use javelins and stingers. They certainly are able to use the small arms and ammunition that we're providing and rocket-propelled grenades, that kind of thing. But there are some systems, like the Switchblade, which is a small tactical drone that we did need to provide a couple of days of training for some of their troops on. The howitzers that the president talked about today, another 72 are going in with this latest package. They know how to use basic artillery pieces that they are comfortable with. They're not familiar with American howitzers. So right now, even as you and I talk, there's some training going on outside of Ukraine for a group of Ukrainian fighters, artillerymen, on how to use American howitzers. They will go back into Ukraine after about a week, and they will train their colleagues and teammates on how to use the howitzers that we're providing them.
Specifically on the howitzers, how quickly will they get there?
We believe the first set of howitzers from the previous $800 million that the president announced last week will start to arrive in the next day or so, and then we'll complete that fairly quickly. And again, as I said, the first shipment from this latest one, just from today, the first pieces of that shipment will start arriving also in the next 24 to 48 hours. We're moving as fast as we can, sir. We know that time is not our friend. We're mindful of the clock here as the Russians begin to move more forcefully into the Donbass, moving more enabling capabilities, moving more forces in there. There are offensive operations happening in the east right now. So these howitzers are desperately needed, as are the artillerymen to man them, and we're trying as fast as we can to get them up to speed and ready.
Is the United States tracking the weapons in any way once they cross the border?
Well, we don't have a tracking devices on this stuff as it goes in. I mean, it's provided out of Department of Defense stocks. We know what we're giving them. We have serial numbers for everything that we are transferring to Ukraine. But once it gets into Ukraine, it's Ukrainian property. And we're not mandating to them where they take it, how fast it gets to fighters on the field, what battlefields it goes to. That's up to the Ukrainians. It's their property, Ukrainians. It's their property at that point.
Russia test launched a new intercontinental ballistic missile on Wednesday. We were all watching that around the world. What does that tell you about President Putin? Is it saber rattling or perhaps a sign of something to come?
Well, we did not view this particular test launch as a threat to our homeland or to that of our allies and partners. I would remind the Russians actually did use the New START treaty notifications to appropriately inform us that they were launching this missile, so it was not a surprise. We knew it was coming. We knew when it was coming, and we knew what they were going to be testing. So we did not view this as a threat. Now, Mr. Putin followed it up with some rhetoric, boisterous rhetoric about the threat that it poses to I think he said food for thought for countries that might be thinking in inimical ways to what Russia's trying to do in Ukraine. That was unhelpful rhetoric coming from a nuclear power. We don't use that kind of rhetoric when we talk about our nuclear capabilities, but we noted that Mr. Putin decided to use that opportunity, a test that we knew was coming, to make a threat like that.
What do you make of all of that at the Pentagon? On one level, the Russians are informing you about the launch, the missile test. On another level, you have this heated rhetoric coming from Putin. What is the Pentagon's assessment of Putin's mental health and mindset right now?
Well, we don't have experts, psychological experts on his mental health and his status. But when a nuclear power like Russia, with their capabilities, the president makes boisterous rhetoric on nuclear capabilities, such as he did in the first 3 or 4 days of the invasion, we take note of that. We have to. It would be irresponsible if we didn't. So we're monitoring their nuclear capabilities as best we can. I would just tell you this, that we have seen nothing, including from this test. We've seen nothing that forces us to feel like we need to change our own strategic nuclear deterrent posture and capabilities to be able to defend the homeland or our allies and partners. We're comfortable that those capabilities are in good shape, that they're properly postured and properly ready.
Final question. Appreciate your time here. About the homeland question. What is the risk of a Russian military attack on the United States? Not just a cyber attack, but a military attack on the U.S. or U.S. targets?
I would tell you that we look at this every single day, and even today, we see no indication that Russia has any designs or any interests or any intention to attack NATO territory or the United States.
Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby, appreciate your time.
Thank you.